Have you ever seriously tried to imagine what a perfect society would actually look like? I mean, not just a little better, but completely flawless? Well, that's the huge question the ancient Greek philosopher Plato took on in his famous work, The Republic. Today, we're going to dive into his incredible and, frankly, pretty controversial blueprint for justice. It's a massive question, isn't it? If you had a blank slate, what would be your number one guiding principle? For Plato, writing over 2,000 years ago, the answer wasn't just about making better laws or picking better leaders. No, it was about designing an entire society that was in perfect natural harmony, and he was convinced he'd found the master key to do it. So for Plato, the secret sauce wasn't a specific set of rules or a particular form of government. It was something way more fundamental. He came up with this idea of a master plan, what he called an architectonic idea, and at the very center of it all was one powerful concept: justice. Okay, so what in the world does architectonic even mean? It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Think about an architect who's designing a massive skyscraper. They don't just start putting up walls randomly, right? They begin with a master blueprint, a single foundational plan that decides where every single pillar, every floor, and every room is supposed to go. For Plato, justice was that master blueprint for all of society. And he actually used this building metaphor himself. He said justice is the cornerstone. It's the very first stone you lay, and every other part of the building, of the state, has to be built on top of it and perfectly aligned with it. This is the big takeaway. For Plato, justice isn't just one good quality among many. It is the supreme organizing principle of everything. So if justice is this grand blueprint for the state, where did Plato even get the design? You'd probably expect him to look at other cities or maybe different governments for inspiration. But he didn't. Instead, he looked inward. He believed that to build a just society, you first had to understand what makes a just person. And that meant looking into the human soul itself. Plato said the soul has three distinct parts. First up, you've got reason. That's our logical side, the part that seeks truth and wisdom. Then there's spirit, which is our sense of honor, courage, and ambition. And finally, you have appetite, which covers all of our basic desires for things like food, money, and pleasure. Now, in Plato's view, a just person is someone whose reason is firmly in charge, guiding the spirit and making sure the appetites don't run wild. It's all about that perfect internal harmony. Okay, now here's where Plato makes this absolutely brilliant and, let's be honest, kinda audacious leap. He takes this three-part model of the individual soul and just blows it up to design the entire state. He famously said that the state is just the individual writ large. It's the exact same principles, just on a massive societal scale. And as you can see here, the pieces just fit together like a perfect mirror. The state, just like the soul, gets split into three parts. You have the rulers, the philosopher kings, who represent reason and govern with wisdom. Then you have the auxiliaries, the soldiers, who embody spirit, and they defend the state with courage. And finally, you have the producers, the farmers, the craftsmen, and they reflect appetite, taking care of society's basic needs. For Plato, this isn't just some clever comparison, it's the fundamental structure of a just society. And this gets us to Plato's really radical definition of justice. Basically, it's functional specialization. It's so important to get this because it's completely different from our modern ideas of rights and equality. For Plato, justice is harmony. It's the principle that says the rulers should rule, the soldiers should defend, and the producers should produce, and nobody should meddle in anyone else's business. A just society is like a perfectly tuned machine where every single part is doing exactly what it was designed to do. But who keeps this whole complex system running? Who is the master architect overseeing this grand design? Well, that brings us to the most famous and definitely the most controversial character in Plato's Republic. Plato's solution was, to put it mildly, radical. Forget democracy, that's ruled by the mob. Forget aristocracy, that's ruled by the rich. For Plato, the only people who were fit to rule were philosophers. He argued that you have to give absolute power only to those who have true wisdom. But why? Why philosophers? Because, Plato says, unlike everybody else who's driven by a thirst for honor or a hunger for wealth, the true philosopher is driven only by reason.
They've spent their entire lives pursuing truth, not power. And because of that, Plato argued they're the only ones you can trust to steer the ship of state toward the common good, not toward their own personal benefit.
You know, it all sounds pretty elegant in theory, a society run by the wisest and most virtuous people around. But as you can probably imagine, this idea has faced some, let's say, serious criticism over the centuries. Is this a blueprint for a perfect utopia, or is it a blueprint for something a lot darker? And this really is the central tension of the whole thing. On the one hand, Plato's goal is a perfectly harmonious society, totally free from all the conflict and chaos he saw around him. But on the other hand, critics look at this and say, whoa, concentrating all power into the hands of an unelected few, that's a recipe for totalitarianism. Does this system create harmony, or does it just crush individual freedom and turn people into cogs in a giant state machine? So with all these heavy criticisms, why are we still talking about this 2,400-year-old idea? It's because whether you think it's a perfect utopia or a dangerous dystopia, Plato's blueprint for society just continues to resonate. I mean, think about it. Every time we debate what makes a good leader, we're basically having a Platonic debate. We talk about the need for wisdom, for integrity, for a commitment to public service over personal profit. We may not be calling for philosopher kings, but Plato's core idea that the quality of a society depends on the moral and intellectual virtue of its leaders, that's an idea that has never, ever gone away. In the end, Plato's blueprint forces us to face a really uncomfortable, timeless question. To achieve a perfectly just and harmonious society, what individual freedoms are we, you and I, willing to sacrifice for the common good? It was an urgent question in ancient Athens, and you know what? It is just as relevant and just as difficult for us to answer today.